Theodore Roosevelt. He's a little obscure, so it's okay if you've never heard of him. As a New York governor turned 26th POTUS, this guy might seem a little boring. He came from a family of wealthy elite New Yorkers, attended Harvard, and networked his way into politics. Sounds like everyone's story, right? Well, that's where you'd be wrong. Theodore was born in 1858 and was raised in this pretty decent townhouse at 28 East 20th Street. Teddy suffered a difficult childhood with crippling asthma, but was smart and talented nonetheless. His favorite hobby was collecting specimens for his taxidermy collection, and he called this the Roosevelt Museum of Natural History. It's adorable, and pretty impressive for an 8-year-old kid. But as his collection grew, his father, Theodore Sr., was working on something a little bit bigger. On April 8, 1869, the charter to establish the American Museum of Natural History was drafted in the Roosevelt home, to which a 17-year-old Teddy would later contribute a beautiful taxidermied snowy owl. Contradicting his doctor's orders, Theodore basically willed himself to get stronger by exercising more and by spending more time outside. And as a result, his fascination with the natural world just grew, and he actually chose to go to Harvard because of the legacy left by the late professor and director of comparative zoology, Louis Agassiz. A few years after Harvard, Teddy suddenly lost his mother and his first wife on the same day, and to cope with this, he headed west to North Dakota, where he sunk his inheritance into land he dubbed Elkhorn Ranch, and he turned himself into a real-life cattle ranching cowboy. It was this experience to which he attributed his political success. As vice president, Roosevelt stepped in as commander-in-chief after McKinley was assassinated in 1901. And then Roosevelt ran for president on his own merit in 1904 and won. And since then, he's been known as our conservation president. He has set aside over 200 million acres of land for national forests, reserves, and wildlife refuges. During his last few months in office, Teddy proposed an expedition to East Africa that he would embark on immediately after the presidency. And the Smithsonian agreed to partially fund it in exchange for a massive amount of specimens that actually now make up the Roosevelt collection in the Mammals Hall in the Museum of Natural History in DC. The remaining kills went to the AM&H here in New York. This trip contributed to Roosevelt's lifetime count of 296 kills. These kills included endangered species such as the northern white rhino. This creates a bit of a contradiction for someone known as our conservation president, but it was through the collection and study that Roosevelt felt he could create human understanding around these species and in turn help to conserve them. He also felt that preserving big game animals would help our study of life in the long run. Without these specimens forever on display at the 2 largest natural history museums in the world, many of us would never know the scale of a blue whale or the ferocity of a dinosaur's smile. There now stands a great statue of Teddy Roosevelt outside the main entrance of the AM&H, and his name is emblazoned on countless signs: Theodore Roosevelt Park, Theodore Roosevelt Rotunda, Theodore Roosevelt Memorial Hall. The list goes on, and they're not talking about his father. It is impossible to deny this man's contribution to the museum, which in turn has had an indelible mark on anthropology, mineralogy, and yes, evolutionary biology.